As we've just said, 2014 is the year of the referendum on Scottish independence. In September, voters north of the border will decide whether they want to break free from the United Kingdom. Now, some point out that the Yorkshire and Humber region has a similar population size to Scotland. So is it time once again to debate the prospect of home rule for Yorkshire? Here's Len Tingle.
Scotland, a proud nation with a population of around 5.2 million. Yorkshire and the Humber, equally proud, and a bigger population of 5.3 million. But Scotland has a more successful economy. Last year, average hourly earnings in Scotland were £12.32 per person. Yorkshire and the Humber, almost £1 less, at £11.47. Unemployment levels in Scotland are running at 7.1%. In Yorkshire and the Humber, 8.6%. Some argue that's down to another difference. Scotland has a parliament that runs its own economy. Yorkshire does not. But there are those who say that's got to change and are campaigning for more power to be wielded from inside Yorkshire.
Well, I'm not sure whether it's a parliament we need, but I think Yorkshire and Humber has a population the same size as Scotland, an economy double the size of Wales, and yet we don't have any of the self-determination powers of either. And it just doesn't make sense. Why can't we get fair funding from London and decide what we want to do with our own resources?
But haven't we been here before? A decade ago, this building behind me here in Wakefield was earmarked as potentially being the home of the very first directly elected regional assembly for Yorkshire. A lot of public money was spent on the plan, months went into preparation. It came to nothing. A major campaign simply failed to attract enough support. The Yes campaigners claimed everything from crime to the economy would improve.
Vote yes for an assembly for our region and turn us on.
The No campaign simply ridiculed the idea as an expensive extra layer of government that even aliens beaming in from space would find amusing. The then Labour government had planned referendums on setting up elected assemblies for 3 regions, but finished up cancelling 2 of them, including Yorkshire and the North West. The only one that went ahead in the North East saw 3/4 of those who bothered voting turning down the idea.
The region has voted no to an elected assembly for the North East. 119.
It was a pretty disastrous campaign. Very little power was being offered to transfer to a North East Assembly, so it's not really surprising it was voted down. And so much has happened over the last 10 years. We've seen the success of devolution in Scotland, in Wales, and also in London. London really is a good example of regional government at work.
What's interesting is that these voices calling for more power in the north aren't just looking towards Scotland or even Wales with its assembly. Their eyes are cast firmly south, towards London with its all-powerful mayor and its booming economy.
I therefore declare Boris Johnson to be elected as the Mayor of London.
But the high-profile leadership of Boris Johnson in London and that relative economic success under the SNP's Alex Salmond in Scotland still isn't enough for those who refuse to believe that regional assemblies, backed heavily at the time by the then Deputy Prime Minister John Prescott, would redress the economic balance.
If we're to get real power to Yorkshire, that means that, for example, we don't have Yorkshire as part of the National Health Service. We have a Yorkshire Health Service that's independent. Or we have Yorkshire universities that are not charging tuition fees. People would vote for that. But would they also vote to pay for the taxation to pay for such a policy? So when you get down into the meat of the debate, I really don't think there'd be any more support for Yorkshire devolution than we saw 10 years ago.
In many respects, whether the Scots vote for or against independence in September isn't the issue for Yorkshire at the moment. What's interesting is that it sparked off discussion about whether lack of political power is holding back northern regions.
Nigel Adams, is it time once again to look at home rule for Yorkshire and the Humber?
Well, I think we've looked at it. I tend to agree with the aliens in this package and also with John Watson. I think there's enough politicians, there's enough elected politicians in the region. Scotland's a different kettle of fish altogether. They're funded differently with their grant system. We visited this 10 years ago, and the idea that we have more paid politicians rattling around Yorkshire, I don't think the public are going to swallow.
All right, Angela Smith, Labour ditched the idea of regional government 10 years ago. Is there any more appetite for it now?
Well, I think Paul Salverson hit the nail on the head with that one. We've moved on, it's 10 years later, and the evidence is mounting now that we are being damaged economically by the lack of investment in the north and a lack of an ability in the north for politicians to take decisions that are in the interests of the north. We've also got to remember that when it comes to government funding, there is far more money going into London and the South East than we see going into Yorkshire and Lincolnshire. So something has to be done to address that problem. And one of the other issues I think we have to face is that local government, as we know it, is rapidly disappearing. Sheffield will have lost 50% of its budget by 2015. By 2018, the money begins to run out, and there's nothing left except money for social services. That's all there'll be left by 2018. Local government is rapidly being broken beyond repair. So in the vacuum that creates, I think there's an opportunity for a real debate about serious devolution for the great area that is Yorkshire and the Humber.
So surely you accept, Nigel Adams, there is an argument for us having more of a say on how our money is spent in our part of the world.
Well, we do have a say. That's why we have members of Parliament. You know, I think we've got a completely different system. The comparison with Scotland, I don't think really works. They get their block grant and they've got this sophisticated formula as well, and they're entitled to spend their money how they wish. We have however many, we've got dozens and dozens of parliamentarians in the north. We should be fighting our corner. There is money being allocated to Yorkshire for investment, Angela. There's £310 million. We've just seen Haribo tap into that regional growth fund with their projects.
Well.
You know, there is cash there, but we're not saying that we should create another more expensive layer of bureaucracy to be able to govern our region. I just don't think it's feasible, and the public wouldn't want it.
Nobody's arguing that we're wanting to put layer upon layer of political accountability into the picture. All I'm saying is that given the effective destruction of local government that we're now seeing taking place, there's going to have to be a serious look at what we do for the future in terms of governance in Yorkshire and the Humber. And I'll say this as well. We've seen Amazon, for instance, decide to invest in Scotland rather than the North East because of what the Scottish Parliament was able to offer that company by way of incentives for investment. So we have to be able to address the issues created by a more independent Scotland and the power base that is London and the South East. Yorkshire is being squeezed by the two, and we have to deal with that.
So do we have devolution for Lancashire? Do we do the same in Derbyshire? Where do we stop?
We need a new
Rutland?
We need a new constitutional settlement which deals with the fact that, as I've already said twice, local government is disappearing as we know it at the moment.
Well, they're having to do more with less,
and
as is everyone
Yorkshire
else.
and Lancashire, the north of England generally, is really suffering badly in terms of funding from central government. It does not get the deal that you're saying it gets, Nigel.
Well,
Haribo's may have got a deal, and some other companies may have done, but the levels of investment are not as good as we've seen in the southeast of England or even in Wales.
Yeah.
What about London, though? London has a regional assembly. That seems to work. Boris never complains about that, does he?
Well, because the people wanted it. You know, we've been down this route of asking people, do you want regional assemblies? Where we had an election in the North East, you saw the result there. It was, absolutely categoric. There was no appetite for it. London's a completely different market. It's very much a financial centre, and it's very, very... I think it's far too simplified to compare the two, and certainly far too simplified to compare Scotland with us as well.
And therein lies the problem. London is the financial centre. We have an economy which is broadly based on the financial services. And if the north is to regenerate, and if Yorkshire in particular is to regenerate and be successful, we need to build our manufacturing base. And to do that, Yorkshire needs to have more control over its destiny. I think it's as simple as that.
But we have plenty of examples of success in Yorkshire. And I do wish
we need more.
I do wish that we would our politicians would talk up our region.
Well,
a bit more.
I do, Jenna, but we need a lot more of what we've had.
Always an interesting talking point. This one always comes out of the woodwork every so often, doesn't it?